Ladies and gentlemen, I need to share with you tonight that look I saw on the faces of many Canadians this week, that look was very disturbing. It was in reaction to hearing that one of the accused train bombers stood up in a Canadian courtroom and stated that Canadian law was not legitimate in his eyes, that he did not have to obey it because it did not come from his creator. It was not a product of Islam. And so it's time for some Canadian common sense. Look, what bothered me most was not that he said it. That was bad enough. It was that so many Canadians, after all these years, still have a capacity for shock when they hear something that is hardly isolated to one single person accused of plotting mass murder. There are many people around the world who have a deep-rooted belief that only their God's law matters, that everything else, especially everything else that has the stamp of the Western world on it, the Judeo-Christian world, the secular world, everything else that is called rule of law is garbage. There are many around the world, and some of the many happen to live in our own country. We've got to be realistic about this. And they believe that our laws are ridiculous, that our culture is ridiculous. Some feel that, well, they feel that way every time they see a woman, like the judge in the courtroom, not covered head to toe, as opposed to several women who were completely covered in that Toronto courtroom, there to support the man who publicly defecated on Canada. Now, we have presumption of innocence in this country. We respect that. We say if he did this, and if he did that, and allegedly this, and possibly this. Anyway, all that rhetorical handcuffing and tut-tutting that we do. For the benefit of who? The accused. Whether we respect his values or not. We do it out of respect for the law that he feels is beneath him. We respect our own laws, so we give him the benefit. He has all the benefits of Canadian law, even if he isn't a Canadian citizen. A right, of course, that he would never grant anybody in a society that mirrors his version of a perfect world run under strict Sharia law, strict religious Muslim law, which is what he believes in. His statement in court crossed the line. And I don't have to say it allegedly crossed the line. Here's what the public safety minister in our own government said about this idea that some may have that Canadian law is not supreme.
If they don't accept the law and they breach the law, they'll nevertheless be subject to the law and subject to the punishments that flow. You can't have a society without law. Our very freedom is defined by our framework of law. And for one individual or one group to say that they are above the law causes huge concern and in fact creates anarchy.
Without rule of law, we're in the jungle. Anarchy. Folks, you need to know this about your own country. It is not fear-mongering to say that if even one person in Canada is willing to act on the belief espoused by the accused in a Toronto courtroom, if even one person in this country wants to respond with violence to that belief system, we are less safe than we ought to be. But the tough questions that we have to ask ourselves are these. Have we done enough? Enough to ensure that we have as few people in this country as humanly possible trafficking in this kind of dangerous belief system? Is gullibility a strategy for security? Do we believe that we are safer in our homes, keeping the doors unlocked at all times? I mean, if you do that, will you change your mind once you've been burglarized and brutalized, invaded by people who have no respect for your property, no respect for the Canadian law, no respect for you as a Canadian? These things are never as complicated as the professional complicators like to pretend they are. There are certain people in the usual circles, some in the teaching profession, some who populate media platforms, and they lecture and scold Canadians who have come to believe that our porous immigration system has been taken advantage of, corrupted, if you will, by bogus refugees with bogus ideologies and a bogus legal industry that keeps that music playing. We get told by those who lecture us that if we believe that the system is porous, we are being intolerant. Being intolerant for seeing what we see. Too many of us are played for suckers by that labeling of our legitimate views. Think about this. Next time some media whore or other hustler tries to tell you that you're intolerant, think about this. A grown man, 30 years of age, is allowed into this country, permitted to do his PhD at a Canadian university, subsidized by Canadian taxpayers. He is investigated by the RCMP and then charged with several acts that violate the Canadian Criminal Code, all relating to conspiring to murder innocent Canadians on sovereign Canadian soil. And then this man gets up in a Canadian courtroom and tells the judge that he does not believe that Canadian law should ever be applied to him, that Canadian law is not sovereign because it's based on the value system of Western culture, not Quran scripture. And despite all of this, he can still access representation, a trained, licensed Canadian lawyer at no cost to himself, and that lawyer must represent his interests. And some of his fellow lawyers will fight for the idea that we should not bar entry to Canada from others who have a similar belief system and ready to act on it. Now, if this theater of the absurd is disturbing to you, you must be intolerant. That's the message of the politically correct practitioners, that you're intolerant. Folks, I guess this is what makes us a great, tolerant country. Some lawyers and some academics will argue, and some media professionals will not provide a moat between that nonsense in your mind. That's what makes us a tolerant country. They won't even challenge this kind of politically correct orthodoxy. They will enable the message that we need to continue to be open to all ideas, all people, whether they respect us or not. Otherwise, the world will stop respecting us. They'll stop thinking of us as nice, open. I love that Canada is an open society. But I ask you, how on earth can we remain open if we open our doors to those who wish to shut us down, disrespect our laws, disrespect our rights to free speech and freedom of worship? If your neighbor invites the burglar into his home and then complains that some jewelry has gone missing, do you feel sympathy? Or do you tell him that there's something missing above the neck? And so when I saw the startled looks this week and heard the collective Canadian gasp about what the accused had downloaded in the Canadian courtroom, I asked myself the question, are we as a country missing something above the neck? Folks, our necks are on the line. You don't have to take it from me. Take it from the PhD student whose tuition and lawyer we are helping to pay for. By the way, are you wondering what he's doing his PhD in? Nanosensors. Nanosensors, often used in medical research to find tumors. He may have found one in the brain of Canada's immigration system. I think you and I agree. We need less political correctness, more brain surgery. That's Canadian common sense.
For reasons only they know, the police in their press conference thought it appropriate to raise the issue of my client's status in Canada, and I can tell you that he is a permanent resident in Canada and has lived here for 20 years and has very deep roots here. I think it's quite regrettable that the police chose to make an issue of that. It seems intended in the current climate to simply demonize my client, and that's most regrettable.
Lawyer John Norris representing via bomb plotter suspect Rayad Jasser, questioning why authorities would even bring up the fact that he's not a Canadian citizen, questioning the timing of the arrest, close on the heels of the Boston bombings, and Tory Bill S7, the Combating Terrorism Act, which passed last night. But how much does Canadian law actually matter to these suspects anyway? Again, here's a court statement by his fellow suspect, Chiheb Esseghaier, on the charges laid against him. I'm quoting him now. All of those conclusions were taken out based on criminal code, and all of us know, we know that this criminal code is not holy book. It's written by a set of creations, and the creations are not perfect because only the Creator is perfect. So if we're basing our judgment, we cannot rely on the conclusions taken out from those judgments. So is this the voice of pure arrogance, naivety, drivel? Are people going to start searching for root causes? Joining us now is crime specialist Ross McLean. Ross, first of all, you're a former cop. You specialize in all sorts of criminal activity. I want you to talk back to the lawyer for one of the defendants who says he doesn't understand why any police authority would release information pertaining to the fact that his client is not even a Canadian citizen. Your take?
Well, that's pertinent information for the Canadian people and for everybody to know. Because when you're talking about acts of terrorism, you're talking about something, Charles, that skews more towards war, in my opinion, than it does criminal code. And, you know, one thing I've had some people mention to me, they thought that this lawyer was treating this more like it was a speeding ticket or some kind of a small, low-level offense. Not someone who, if they had, you know, their plan had come to fruition, could have killed, maimed, and injured hundreds of people.
Ross, I want to also run a clip here of Vic Taves, because we were pressing him yesterday on the issue of deportation, and it flowed from this particular case. This non-citizen who has committed crimes over and over and over again, including conviction for uttering a death threat, was not deported. And so I wanted to press Mr. Taves on what it is that our government is doing to throw out people who, A, don't belong in this country, and B, are committing crimes against Canadian citizens. Here's the minister.
I do want to thank my colleague Jason Kenney, who has had just a real focus on addressing those kinds of issues. Canadian citizenship is a right, the right to remain here on a permanent basis, even if you're not a Canadian citizen, brings certain obligations. And one of those is to basically keep the peace and be of good behavior. And Canadians can be certain that our government is bringing forward laws that were not in place that allow us to move individuals who break the law very quickly.
Ross, as a veteran crime fighter and now a crime analyst, what's your personal experience of people who are allowed to remain in Canada despite the fact that they're not Canadians and they're committing crimes and they're convicted of committing crimes, and there are deportation orders which they pay no attention to and are not enforced by the government?
It's a national shame the way we've been doing it for a number of years. Because what you see, Charles, is you see people coming in here who are not cleared correctly first when they come in. I've talked to people who work closely with the Immigration Board, and they talk about how the people who work at the Immigration Board are appointees, who are sort of crony appointees. And they say they just fall for the same repetitive arguments over and over again for people to get in here. But the real problem is getting them out when they commit crimes. I mean, I know people, and I'm sure there's viewers here who know about it. If you were caught so much with having a joint in Toronto and had that on your record, or from somewhere in Canada, and you tried to go into the U.S., you're going to be stopped at the border, and they won't even let you in if you have any sort of criminal record. And that's between two friendly countries, let alone when you have people coming from countries that are known for terrorism, that are known for having issues with exploiting terrorism when they arrive. And they're committing crimes here, and they're not getting out. I think it's important, especially that new law about losing your citizenship if you're involved. And, you know, I would suggest they may even want to look further at that, Charles, in that a lot of these terror networks are supported by family members in the country. They're housed, they're given money and something. You know, maybe you and all of your family should be going as well, too. Then maybe you might think twice about committing terrorism in this country.
Ross, here's something I don't understand. I touched on this earlier. The sort of high priestesses and priests of political correctness are telling us that we shouldn't talk about porous immigration because if we do that, we're being xenophobic, we're not being open-minded, we're not being open, we're not being multicultural, blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, many roads lead to this argument that somehow we're being Islamophobic. But all of this reminds me of the ridiculous arguments in Toronto against the idea of doing sweeps of criminals and criminal suspects in the projects, okay? I just don't understand that in public housing. Because to me, most of the people, and I always use the example of the mothers, because that's what you've got a lot of, you've got single mothers and their sons and daughters. How are they made safer by us not using governmental authority, police authority, to clear the bad guys out of there? They're at ground zero. The bad guys are affecting them. They're infecting them. They're recruiting their sons and daughters for criminal behavior. How on earth are we being pro the poor in those projects by not sending in the cops? Well, to me, it's the same thing. The Muslim communities are at ground zero. They're the ones who will be most impacted by radical Islam. And so how on earth are we being pro-Muslim, pro-law-abiding Muslim by not going after the bad guys.
No, exactly. You know, one of the things, and I've spoken to people who've grown up and lived successfully in those housing projects, and they say exactly what you say. The single mothers are saying, I know who all the bad guys are. You know, police, come with me in here. I'll walk you around and I'll show you the guys we need out of here. It's no secret to them who the poisons are in their neighborhoods that are making it tough for their children. And when it comes to the Islamic movement here in Canada, it's the same issue. You know, I talked the other day with a former CSIS person about all of the power struggles that go on in these mosques. They almost come to fights, wars, and threats between who gets to have domination in there. So if you're a moderate, Canadian-loving Muslim, which there are tons of, but you can't use your voice in your own place of worship where you go to, and you get shouted down and you get bullied, we need to help correct that. We really do, because there's a lot of people who care about this country who are Muslim.
Well, it just bothers the hell out of me that when you actually want to be very careful and very surgical about removing certain elements of communities, that the blowback is, the politically correct blowback is that, oh, no. What you really want to do is harm the entire community. And I just find that kind of bigotry, you know, bigotry against common sense Canadians abhorrent. And I'm glad that I've got you on with us, and I'm glad that we've got other people on the network talking about this, because we've got to talk back to this. None of this is theoretical. None of this is academic. Not when they want to blow up trains. And I'm talking about radicals wanting to blow up trains. Let me just, before I let you go here, do you suspect there are many other investigations that are active right now into the same sort of heinous activity that we talked about this week in that Toronto courtroom?
Yes, there are. We've heard about it, that the FBI is looking at people down in the U.S. We know that they were looking at other people up here in Canada. The Sun's own Joe Warmington did an interview with an imam here in Toronto the other day, in which the imam said he believes there are, in his own words, hundreds of radicalized Muslims in the GTA area. That's just in the GTA. So there are issues that we need to look at here to try and uncover this. And that's why we need these new laws, Charles, that we're pushing through. And I commend the government and Vic Toews for getting them through. We need them because we have to preempt terrorism, not wait for it to happen and then clean it up.
Ross, thank you very much for your help. As always, we'll see you next Thursday.
We'll see you then, Charles. Thank you.
Crime specialist Ross McLean. He's based in Toronto.